to the August meetings. Finance Committee first. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Frank Facciano.
Present.
Paul Anthony.
I'm here.
Robert Brooks. John Hayes.
Here.
Ron Heckman. Larry Hemberger. Mike Stershik.
Here.
Jonathan Strauss.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Quorum. Excellent. So welcome, everybody. First action is to approve the meeting minutes from our June meeting. Can I get a motion on that? Mike, second.
Move.
Jonathan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. With the financial statements, we're gonna approve the June and July statements, but we're gonna hear the July, see the July presentation. Take it away, Todd.
Morning, everybody. Hopefully everybody's
Morning,
enjoying
Todd.
their summer. Alrighty. As Frank mentioned, we're just going to go through July. Talk about traffic. The green marks here, we always try to mark what is our highest mark during this time period from 2017. So you can see in 2022, our best July was then. You can see, however, that our best July probably is on record for Allegiant is this year. But overall, kind of what we talked about before as far as traffic, down some, but we do expect it to pick back up a little bit later in the year. You can see we're pretty much on course to where we were last year, year to date, and a little less than, slightly less than we were in 2019. We'll talk about our load factors, and we break it down between air side and also on the bus. This came up the last meeting. We wanted to break down the bus traffic and the loads on those. So you can see we're doing quite well on as far as compared to 2019 on our air traffic. But as far as bus, we only really have this year. But you can see that the American with the now going through TSA is actually picking up. You can see that down there, that in June we were at 91%, July 87%, United staying steady around that 58%. Always compare ourselves to all U.S. airports. You can see our throughput is -7 in our seats, but we are doing better than our seats. Our seats are down almost 12, but our throughput is down 7, and that kind of goes into factor with the load factors we talked about earlier. You can see all U.S. airports are doing slightly better than they were in 2019, but they're not using the same amount of seats that we are. So they're up 3.4, and their throughput is 1.8.
Again, just to repeat, so yield-wise, the available seats are lower by 11.5%.
Yes, but people are using.
We're only lower by 7%, so the yield is higher, but still comes up a little short.
Right, we have less empty seats at this point than we did. Even though we have less available, we have less empty seats overall. Again, we tried to pair ourselves to our peers, and I know this came up last time, what is a peer? And our peers, with the exception of Scranton and Scranton and Harrisburg, which we include because of their proximity, these are all within 90 minutes of our major hub, about our size, and they have a lot of kind of similar service. So that's why we use these as kind of our, our peers. But you can see our peers are doing much worse than we are. The throughput's down 24%, and the seats are down 22%.
Todd, what do you think, or actually this might be better directed to Tom. Tom, why do you think the other regional airports just aren't recovering? What's driving that, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be unique for each facility, but I do think the fact that we have the Allegiant base here really helped. Again, as we talked about, getting the base online prior to the pandemic, and then really now feeling the effect of that base has made a big difference for us.
And it has been interesting as well, Allegiant adding routes, even though they told us they weren't going to add routes in 2023. That helps.
Right. Agreed.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So this is our statement for July. You can see our, last year, we had a net income of 465,000. This year, somewhat less, about 330,000 change, but doing much better than budget. But it's always good to kind of see if you take out the CARES and and we were at full staffing because, we have some margin there. That number goes from 331 down to 119 for the month. Still positive though, but it's something to keep in mind as we move toward the point where we don't have CARES. This is year to date. And again, we're at 4 million, which seems like a pretty good number. But if you take out the CARES and full staffing, that goes from 4 million down to 857,000. Still positive, but obviously not as robust as 4 million. Again, our CARES, and you can see what's going up as far as we've done pretty well as far as managing expenses, not just employee counts versus budget, but also expenses, other expenses that we've managed to manage very well. And our leasing revenue is up, so that's helped us out a little bit. And this is our projection, and I'll talk about, I know it's on in the discussion item, but this is kind of where we think we're going to be at this point through the end of the year. We do one of these around mid-year just to kind of give us a projection of where we think we're going to be. You can see that we think we're going to be favorable. Now, one of the things we've talked about is moving some of our CARES, which is really ARPA right at this point. But CARES, we have until 2026 to use all of our CARES. And we're unique because if we spend too much money on CARES, that reduces the expenses, and that really benefits the airlines more than us. So we try to be very strategic about that, so to make sure we get to use it. So the thought might be that we push back some of that into next year, because originally we were talking about 2 million for next year and 1 million in 2026 to give us some cushion there. So what we ended up doing is pushing back some of the CARES to the end of the year, just to kind of give us a feel on what we might need going into next year. Because we're going to use it all, but we want to make sure we want to use it so that we get the most benefit from it and not just pay it back out to the airline. Because people that weren't here, the first year we got CARES, there was discussion about, well, why don't you just take it all in 1 year? And we said, no, we don't want to do that because ultimately it's just a reduction of expenses, right. And that would have benefited the airlines, and they would have forgotten about it by now and said, how come our rates are so high? So again, that's something to keep in mind. Now, a couple other things we are going to push back some of the demolition for the government building. That was one of the things we're going to use the CARES for. So it was approximately 320. That's automatically going to be pushed into next year. We're using some of the CARES for that. So that's going to go into next year. But the other, it's about 67,000. We're pushing back to later in the year just to see, if we're going to need it and roll it into next year. But you can see, like at this point, we're going almost $5 million in net income is what we're projecting versus a budget of 2.1. And obviously, that's a good thing. You can see there at 320 that we're pushing back because that was really for the demolition that we kind of matched up some of the CARES with that. And it's while we're here, I just want to point out something because I know we've talked a lot about expenses, but if you look at that actual for 2022, our revenues, net revenues, and that's after cost of sales, is up 5%, but our expenses are up 12% and 14% on depreciation. And depreciation is really our infrastructure. Obviously, we're doing a lot of infrastructure. All you have to do is look out the window and you can see that. But, that's something to keep an eye on. Obviously, we want that net revenue number to at least keep pace with some of the expenses and depreciation. Some of that was just catch up in some of the things. But again, long term, that's something to really keep our eye on. Talking about our streaks, this is positive net income by month without CARES and without miscellaneous income. So this year we are 7 for 7. So we're on a roll. Let's keep it going. Maybe we'll break our streak of 2019 and go for 12 for 12. And this is our profit centers. Again, you can see that parking is on the top there. I think in 2020 it dropped to the bottom there pretty fast because nobody was in the lot. CARES, you can see we're still relying a lot on CARES. That's number 2, aviation lease. You look down there at number 10 on airfield. If you remember, probably forgot about in May when we did the May financials, that number was positive but that's because we didn't include any year-to-date airline settlement in that number. So now, with the anticipated 375,000 that we put in there year-to-date, that number is showing about 312 to the negative. And then you see on the terminal side some of the accruals in there as well. And this is kind of where we are as far as budget impact. You can see the biggest one so far is the 1.5 of salaries, wages, and benefits. Some of that is associated with the milder winter and less time associated with that, but some of that is our staffing levels. And we are inching up, but again, it takes some time, and we did project full staffing pretty early in the year, and that has kind of given us some cushion. You can see our de-icing and fuel is number 2, but net interest, that's something that we've been really working on the accounting side to just kind of get more interest. We've been working with some of our banks to kind of get more interest on some of our CDs and some of our stuff. So that's more interest than we had in our budget, 340,000. So that's helpful. Then you can look at where we are on our personnel. Again, you can see versus budget, we had a pretty good number out there for budget for the month of July. That's a minus 13, consistent with where we are year to date, about that minus 13. Non-personnel, year to date, we're at minus 12 for the month. You can see it's a minus 3, so that number is going up. But look at what it is compared to last year, because again, our budget gave us some flexibility because we really were aggressive in when we thought we could get some of these folks. But if you look at where we were compared to last year, year to date, we're up 15%, non-personnel up 13%. So those are pretty good numbers. But again, it's obvious we gave ourselves some cushion with our budget. This is our employee count, full-time, part-time, and you can see where our year-to-date average is. Again, we're trending up from where we were in 2021. You can see we had a big jump in 2020, and actually, if I put 2020, it was a much bigger jump to 2021 and then 2022. And then you can see that we're getting closer to where we would like to be as far as our staffing levels. And then I know Justin always likes to see this breakdown by department, where we are. You can see, and this is kind of a snapshot. This is not year to date. This is kind of our latest snapshot. You can kind of see what's going on there. Overall, and some of this is just the nature of the beast. It's just hard to keep folks fully staffed in all departments at all times. Some of our jobs are they have a lot of turnover. It's just the nature of the beast, particularly when the weather changes and people go, man, I got to be outside. It's cold out here. Then we look at our cash flow. This is a 6-month cash flow we show here. And you can see there that 468 there on line, I believe that's line 13, that is the last of the $15 million on the connector. So that is the last draw on that money. It's all gone. It's all gone. We did spend it, so it's all gone. 468, just so you know, we still haven't got Rackley back. Maybe we'll get it in next century, but we'll get it eventually. But that 468.
Are we taking bets on that, Todd, when that's going to come through?
That's a losing proposition, John. I'm not taking that one.
Unless you go long, John.
But you can see that's there. What's going on here? And you can just see some of the adjustments we made there. We have that line 20 is one we just keep in there for some of the properties that we have out there that hopefully at some point they'll be realistic and come up with a number that we can move forward on. I know Darren has been in communication with them, but they've been quite unreasonable. But we keep it up there. We're optimistic. You can see on there on line 24 what I talked about. The original number for August was 1.1 million that we were supposed to take for cash. We only took 622. So that's what we have in there when that came in. And then what I said earlier about pushing back some of the money, you see it down here, where it's pushed back in November, December a little bit on where we get those with that CARES money in. Again, and you can also see on line 30, and that's kind of our make-believe number that we put in there just to kind of prepare ourselves for full debt service. Obviously, at this point, once January comes, probably sooner than that, we'll be paying the full debt service anyway, so there's no need to kind of pretend anymore. We've proven that we can kind of manage that cash, but that was just kind of a placeholder for us to say, hey, we're going to be paying for this. Are we comfortable, and what is that going to do for us cash-wise? Because once we start paying for it, we got to be able to make sure we got enough cash to keep moving forward. But you can see we're in pretty good shape. Now, that number here for 69,318, that is the budgeted number that we're using even in January. Probably in the next couple of months, we'll update that as we start anticipating for 2024. It won't go down. It never goes down, but certainly that number will come down a little bit as we, up that number there, that $69,000. I just don't know what it is at this point. And then you can see kind of, again, based on that 69,318, what it looks like for the next 12 months there. I know it's a little long, but and I just missed talking to you guys for a while, so I just wanted to get up here and talk. Any questions? All right, thank you.
All right, so can I get a motion to accept both the June and July financial statements?
Shall make that. Second.
Second.
Mike, let's give it to John. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, are you getting back up?
Yeah, I'll get up. I don't know if I have a slide, but I'll just walk through this.
Regarding the terminal
Yeah, it's
connector
two-
and supplemental resolution.
Two supplemental resolutions. The terminal resolution, as you remember, we had a 2-year interest-only period, and that would have ended in June. We had to push that back because we're going to push back the main one until 9/30, and then the other loan, the bridge loan, back to the end of the year. So this is just formalizing that process. We've already talked about it. This is kind of what we've done. It's just, they wanted a formal resolution, so this is it. So again, we've kind of already talked about it. We already kind of moved forward with it. This is just formalizing that instead of it being interest only until the end of June, we're going to be the end of July for the main 15 million one, and then the end of the year for hopefully our bridge one, and we'll have our RACP money, but John said no way, so maybe, but again, that's kind of what we have at this point. This is just formalizing it. Any questions? Again, this is stuff that we've already talked about. This is just formalizing the agreement, so we have it in there because it wasn't in.
You want us to approve this, right?
Yes, please.
Yeah, motion to approve the terminal connector supplemental resolution.
So moved.
Mike,
Second.
John, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
Aye.
And one more thing for you there, the BMO Harris.
Yeah, and we also had the BMO Harris, so this is one I believe we did originally in 16 or 17, and it was about $4 million that we got on a lease line at that time. They've been kind of letting us use it, subsequently without doing a new resolution. At this point, there's about 1.5 left over. And they just want you to formalize that you got 1.5 for another year. If we don't use it all, we'll probably have to come back next year and go, can we extend it? It's just kind of break the glass for equipment and other things that we can use that. And we have that and another one. We always determine which one works best. We're not spending the money. It's just available for us if we need it. And it's mainly for, like I said, equipment, tools, big ticket items that we might need.
Last year, didn't we?
Vehicle. Yeah, but this is just the line itself. They want to formalize. We did do it last year, but they, no, you can't keep doing it because we've been kind of pushing it forward. They needed a formal resolution.
Okay.
All right, so.
I need approval.
Motion to approve the BMO Harris resolution.
I'll make it.
Second by Mike, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right, that's done. I'm gonna back up, a part I skipped. Do we have any public comment?
No, sir, we don't.
Okay, thank you for that. And then the 2023 year-end projections discussion.
You can bring back that one. I think I talked about it a little bit when we went through earlier, but that one on the slides, there's a bit. Go back to the PowerPoint. The finance one, go back some. Keep going. One more. There it is. We talked about this a little bit, I don't know, it seems like 5 minutes ago, but again, this is kind of our early projection of where we think we're going to be for the end of the year. Again, we think our net income is going to come in close to that $5 million versus our budget at 2.1. Now that number, I think I mentioned this, but I want to be clear, that number could go down if we don't use some of the CARES. That's based on the CARES that we anticipate at this point of 3.7, 3.8 million of CARES. So if we use less, obviously that number would go down, but we would use that going into next year. And just so we're clear, at this point, we're looking at $2,320,000 for CARES next year and then 1 million the final year. So it'd be nice to have a little bit more, and particularly in that final year, but certainly put it in next year and then we can roll it back. But once we get to 2026, we got to use it. So again, you can kind of see, I mentioned this earlier, really where we are, net revenues up 5, expenses up 12 versus last year, and depreciation up 14 because of some of the stuff. It's just kind of a feel for where we are. I know we put in a settlement. So we put in a settlement. I know that sounds like an odd. Every year we have to settle with the airlines based on the airfield, the apron, and the terminal. And they're supposed to be, in the simplest way I put it, supposed to be break even. But you're not making any profit. So we do, and that's based on if we got more revenue in or expenses are lower, you just kind of true it up at the end of the year. So at the end of the year, what we tried to do is kind of give them a higher number and then say, all right, you get money back. Years ago, it used to be the other way, and that wasn't a pleasant experience because it's kind of like under promise. So now we're under promising before we were over promising, and that's worked to our advantage. But at this point, we have about 400, I believe it's 475, somewhere around there, that we've accrued year to date that's in our financial numbers. So that net revenue number there is reduced about $475,000 in anticipation of the settlement. That's just our estimate at this point. So it's built in there, and then we're going to put in another $100,000 at this point each month, depending on how things go, so that at the end of the year we'll have almost $800,000-900,000 of accrued settlement money, and then when we get closer, we do a formal, more formal estimate of what that number is. Any questions?
But the CARES money is in budget, right?
The CARES money is in the budget, correct.
So we're really up.
Yeah, that's still all versus budget. That's all favorable budget. But again, we're trying to get ourselves to the point where, because in 2026, the party's over as far as CARES. And we don't want to go, hey, we've been relying on CARES, and then 2027 comes and we go, psh. So it's just something we're keeping our eye on because obviously you can't recoup that money overnight. So you kind of have to keep a long-term focus on it. Any questions? I know I talked about this twice, so hopefully we're all good now.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Good work, good presentation. Is there any new business? Okay, hearing none there. Motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Paul's motion to adjourn. We are adjourned.
All right, we'll go right into the business committee. So that can take roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Justine Grimshaw,
Here.
Ann Baum, Don Gottschall, James Irwin. Jeff Matskin, he's on the line. Glenn Reedman,
Present.
Chris Worley. We have a quorum.
Any public comment?
No, sir.
Entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from June 22nd.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Ayes have the sword. Think you're up, Ryan, for a while.
Yes,
All right, we'll start with the on-call planning and engineering
stay
consultant.
down as long as I could. Morning, everybody. So a few items I wanted to bring forward to the committee for discussion and approval. First one here, I think we talked about the other month in terms of the process, but we're looking to approve 3 contracts for on-call planning, architectural engineering services. A little bit of a background. With the FAA requirements, we're required to go through a formal selection process for all of our projects that are included on our 5-year capital improvement program with the FAA, capital improvement plan. Typically, it's done every 5 years, but if you have a project, like as most of you know with the runway that have gone through for 7, 8, 9 phases, it can be longer due to the project being included on that original plan. So we advertised in April for consultant services, received 6 responses back in May. Went through with the team to evaluate and rank each of those based on the criteria that was outlined in the documents. Also had an independent consultant that wasn't part of the process review it as well. We all came down to the same 4 firms to be shortlisted for a sample task, again, part of the process. The 4 firms are listed there. It's Airport Design Consultants, AECOM, McFarland Johnson, and JMT, all consultants we've worked with before, have good relationships with, and I'm sure you've seen some of these names and some of the projects we're doing now. Again, as part of the process, if you'll scroll down a little bit so that we're required to do a sample task. So first, consultants submit just on their general qualifications, which we rank. And then from there, we give them a specific task to show us their technical expertise, experience, engineering capability, phasing, and so forth. So we provide them with a task that could be a project in the next couple of years for terminal modernization improvements out in the concourse with new ticketing check-in, again with our new boarding bridge 3 coming online next year. Are there any other improvements we need to do for a gate capacity, hold room capacity analysis? So again, all 4 responded to that task. Again, we reviewed it again. Excuse me, we all ranked the firms in terms of what was provided. So again, reviewing all of the tasks, what we were recommending and in the document is 4-year contracts with 2 1-year extensions, similar to what we had in the last selection. But you'll see here the 3 highest ranking firms were ADCI, AECOM, and McFarland Johnson. Again, 3 firms we currently work with, have a lot of good experience. Again, we were very pleased with what they submitted with the sample task. But the other thing that I think we've talked about before is, even though these are the prime consultants, they have a consultant team that uses a lot of local consultants for the geotechnical surveying, testing, environmental compliance, land development, traffic studies. I mean, all these kinds of components, again, that help us get projects done effectively, on time, on budget, those kinds of components. So, again, with that, we're looking to approve the selection of the following prime consultants. As I mentioned, Airport Design Consultants, or ADCI, AECOM, and McFarland Johnson, and authorize the Executive Director to enter into a 4-year contract with 2 optional 1-year extensions with each firm.
Brian, there are no costs until we call on them?
Correct.
Correct?
Correct. Yep.
Any questions for Ryan? Entertain a motion to approve the on-call planning and engineering process.
So moved.
Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have the sword. Stay up there, Ryan. You can go over the bid for exterior painting.
Great. All right. Thank you. So this project, again, is for the award of bid for the exterior painting of Hangar 7 here at ABE. Again, a little bit of background. Hangar 7 is, probably one of our oldest hangars on the airfield. The paint on the exterior is faded. A lot of it's peeled, flaked, exposing the actual steel of the facility itself. So in order to continue to protect the structure, again, make sure we don't have any structural deterioration, we want to make sure we get that painted. We did include this project in our 2023 CIP under those departmental projects, or Exhibit B. So we did open, just the other day, bids. DMU Enterprises are doing business as Hanaho Painting, submitted the apparent lowest responsible bid in the amount of $196,630. We did include some ad alternates depending on the pricing for each side of the hangar, front, both sides and the rear, and then we did another ad alternate for the time of day for the front, where the hangar doors are, again, to reduce the impact on the tenants. So this award would be for the base bid, which was the front during the weekdays, and then all 3 of the other sides. Again, the bid submitted was in line with the previous estimates we've received, but we recommend adding about a 15% contingency, which is about $30,000 to the project, just because of the nature of the facility, the age. Not sure what we might run into when they actually start taking off some of the paint in terms of some of the potential rotted windows, door frames, those kinds of components. So again, the total project that we're looking for is $226,630, which is within, again, that overall budget from the capital plan. Again, in terms of Hanaho Painting, we haven't had a contract with them in the past, but some LNAA personnel have worked with them before. I've had a good relationship with them. And again, just seeing the work that they've done, previous projects, some photos, references, and the big thing here actually was the lead-based paint removal. That is a whole extra process that I have to be certified for. So again, they met all the necessary components of the project, qualifications that we put in there. So again, we're looking to award the bid to DMU Enterprises, doing business as Hanaho Painting from Reading, Pennsylvania for the exterior painting of 7 to ABE for a total contract amount of $226,630.
How many bids did we get for that?
We only got one on this one.
Only one bid?
We had three companies come to the pre-bid, about, I think, 10 downloaded the documents, and then we ended up only getting one. We called some of the other ones. The lead-based paint removal was one component that they mentioned. Another one couldn't get a bid bond in time. So that was what we received.
Any other questions for Ryan?
Can I just one question? So we haven't done business with Hanaho yet, but somebody in this facility has a relationship or knows their work, or what is that?
They've, their previous position, I think, working in the valley, they've worked with them for other painting of larger facilities.
Okay,
And they've had good experience with them.
so they've worked in the valley.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? No? Take a motion to approve.
So moved.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have the sword. All right, for the new jet bridge, 3 and 10 foundations.
All right, thank you. So what we're looking for here is approval for the second phase of the passenger boarding bridge project. As you recall, we awarded a bid for the acquisition of new bridges 3 and 10, BRH Construction. This is for the second phase for the foundation work for those two new bridges. Really what the work entails is new rotunda support and fixed tunnel walkway foundations for Bridge 3, because there's a fixed portion that's got to come out of the terminal. And then some other bollards and some other improvements at Gate 10. There's already existing foundation there that they'll make some modifications to accommodate the new bridge. BRH Construction, which is again the same contract for Phase 1, submitted the lowest parent responsible bid on August 3rd in the amount of $256,000. So the bid was slightly higher than the engineer's estimate. However, talking with the contractor, looking at the values they provided and somewhat of the lower quantity of concrete required, gave it a higher unit price. But compared to the other bid we received, again, it was favorable for what we were looking for. As we mentioned previously, our costs for this project are zero because they're covered by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development grant. With the first phase and this second phase, once we get some of the other paperwork, it still leaves us about $1 million for the third phase, which is some of the PLC control upgrades for each of the bridges. So that'll be the next phase that we discuss in the future. Again, BRH has done similar projects at other airports for the last 5 years, again, working specifically with boarding bridge foundations and some of the nuances with that. And I think, as we mentioned, the fact that they're also the contractor for Phase 1 reduces some of that inefficiencies of coordination and just making sure we're, in terms of the bridge that we're ordering, is coordinating with the plans and structural drawings as part of the foundations for the bridges themselves. This work would probably be done sometime next spring before the bridges come online. So again, looking to award the bid to VRH Construction of Englewood, New Jersey for the boarding bridge foundations project at ABE for a total contract amount of $256,000.
Any questions, Brian?
I received one other bid, which was substantially higher than this one.
How many did you solicit?
We put it through pen bid. I'm trying to think of how many, grab the documents I could take a look at, but it's pretty wide variety of folks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have the sword. You would do one last favor for us, Ryan, and do the capital projects discussion. I'd really appreciate it.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody. Run through this. We normally do. We added a few components we'll kind of get into, but I'd like to start off with the runway project. You can see it's substantially complete in blue. It's gotten larger since the last meeting. I'll get into some of the details, but since we're on this image, Taxiway Gulf has been completed. Taxiway Echo North was open, I believe, was done last time as well. But the work they're doing now is primarily the shoulder work on the west side of runway 624. Package 3, work's been completed. Really just going through the closeout documents. Again, leave it on here until we get our final about $1 million or so reimbursement in. Hopefully next month, submit it to the FAA for their review to close that project out, that phase. Package 4, this was the phase with Taxiway Gulf. Again, you can see pictures on the left with some of the taxiway edge lighting in the shoulders, which I don't believe any of our other taxiways at this point have taxiway shoulders, which is something that's a newer requirement that's getting added. Again, the FAA pays for. And on the right, you can see the condition there. As a reminder, when the project did was eliminated the connection right here, which the FAA frowns upon from having an air carrier leave the ramp and go straight onto the runway. So again, it's just shifting it so you have to make turns to avoid that potential hazard. So that piece was done, again, working through punch list. The final markings on there have to be done 30 days after paving, so that'll be done in September. Package 5, the nighttime work, again, as I mentioned, of the shoulder construction. It's quite an arduous process, but basically they dig down every night, build back up with the base, put in some temporary edge lighting, and then once it's all done, near the end of the phase of the project, they'll actually come back and pave it. But again, as everything working with the FAA, the stringent requirements where you can't have too much of a lip off the edge of the runway in case aircraft do veer off the pavement. So again, not much work gets done every night, but they're progressing well given the 11 to 5:30 construction window, 11 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. construction window. Again, talked about the boarding bridges, working through submittals right now for the acquisition of the bridges. And as we progress with the foundations, we'll update this slide as well. So one thing we wanted to talk a little bit more about, I know we've mentioned in the past, some of the members of the committee have been here when we did some previous presentations, but we're getting to a point now where I think it's worth discussing a little bit more. Again, a project we had in our CIP was our parking garage and GSE storage building. So a little bit of information, again, more to come as we go, but the biggest thing we've been working with the team on is analyzing the data that we have. As most of you see, the parking lot, majority of the time is pretty full. We've seen our overflow be activated. During peak periods, we're at capacity using our overflow parking lot. On average, between 65 to 75% full over the last 2 years, again, with the ebbs and flows of traffic throughout the year typically. We have a lot more graphs we can get into, I think, as we continue the project. But over the last 5 years, even with the dip in COVID, our passenger growth has been about 16%. And with that, comparing it, because it's not an apples to apples with passenger growth and parking demand and growth, we've used kind of an average of 6% growth that we've seen. Basically what that takes you to is in about 5 years, which is about 2028, even with the overflow lot, we're out of capacity. And obviously, not just from a customer service perspective, but from a revenue standpoint, we're actually losing revenue at that point from people Ubering, lifting, getting their friends drop them off, and so forth. So again, you can kind of see that without the overflow lot, I believe it was about 2 years earlier that our regular lots would be full 100% of the time. So with that, and again, we've talked a little bit about this, what we've been working on this year has been really defining what would be required for that capacity, level of service, primary location. I think about a year ago, we landed on the E lot, which is the lot just outside the terminal here. As we've kind of worked through some of the program definition, which is about a 10% design, we're looking at about 5 levels, 1,100 spaces. And really, the reason I bring this up now is we're looking to put the RFQP out for design engineer selection later this month, beginning of September. See proposals back probably end of September, October, review those, and then actually come back to the committee and the board for interviews, potential selection next year. But again, the reason why that's important is if you look at the duration with roughly 18-month design, 3-year construction, you're right in that 2028 window. As I mentioned, that's when we're running out of capacity from that standpoint. So a lot still to go through, obviously construction estimates. We've had some of those, but the biggest thing, and some of you may be thinking, we didn't include this RFQP as part of our on-call selection because we felt that it was such a unique project and something very specific that we want to make sure we have folks that, basically design and construct garages for a living as part of the team, and using some of our consultants to help program and manage the design process. So again, just want to make the committee aware with some of the steps forward. The other pieces, we're not really showing in here, but we mentioned the GSE storage, as Todd mentioned earlier. Again, we're looking at demolishing the government building. We've been talking about hotel, non-aeronautical development. A lot of that ties into not only our parking capacity, but a lot of the equipment that parks out in front of the government building really should have a consolidated place to be. Some other improvements we got to look at as part of the kind of the air side, land side evaluation. Building demolition, again, we've talked a little bit about. Updated it with some of the last 2 residential properties that are left. We've done 10 of the 12 at this point. Really, over the next couple of months, these 2 will be demolished. One of them actually is inside the fence. The other one is up on Weaversville Road. And then again, as Todd mentioned, we're currently evaluating for the government building, really the inventory of what needs to be modified or moved before we potentially take that building down, because our main power feed comes through that facility, our switch gear, a lot of other components around the parking lots get fed through that facility still. So we just need to make sure with what we're doing, we're still keeping those things active and accounted for. Moving on to Queen City. I think the last time we met, runway 1533 was complete. It was actually reopened June 30th. Final markings were done 30 days later. Again, just working through the final closeout. But we actually had the FAA out here a couple weeks ago, and they're really impressed with the quality of the work, how quickly the contractors got it done, and then ultimately showed them some other areas that we're going to need some funding for over the next few years with some of the other taxiways and aprons on the facility. No real major changes here in terms of updates. And again, we'll continue to update these as we add some of the other projects to the list. And that's it for this one. Any questions before I go into the connector?
I've got a question in regard to the discussion for the parking deck.
Yep.
We need to have a very thorough airing of the financials associated with this kind of a project, probably sooner rather than later, because this is going to be a $40 to $50 million project by the time all said and done. Parking decks are not inexpensive to build, and I think we need to make sure that we're looking at all options and put all issues on the table before we move forward in tackling a project like that. So I want to make sure that we put together whatever pro formas, whatever support we think we can get, and make sure we've got everything in line, because that's going to dwarf the connector bridge.
Agree, John. Yeah, and we've looked at some of that preliminarily, but we can definitely bring that to the forefront as we continue with the project for sure.
Okay. And Tom promised me that we wouldn't vote on it until after I'm off the board. So Tom, I wanted to thank you about it again. I hate parking decks. I hate them with a burning passion.
That's all on us, isn't it?
I think that's on, we'll put that in the minutes.
Potentially some funding.
Yeah, please.
Todd, I like parking decks. It's added revenue, all right?
We got different decks.
Well, that's the minor. That's.
Yeah, the problem is,
Figure it
Paul, the
out.
expense is going to dwarf the revenue is my fear.
See, I felt comfortable when Todd didn't stroke out when John
did
asked
it.
for the numbers.
He's still upright,
So I was like,
so.
we're probably good. I was watching your face. You were, the whole time,
At
you're
the end of the
good.
day, it's not what you make, it's what you keep.
Right.
Yeah, and we did do a lot of discussion internally on the numbers already, but obviously working through the design element is going to help fine tune a lot of that discussion, so,
But we do recognize that it's a huge expense.
yes.
We understand that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's a good comment, John. All righty. So moving on to the connector. Again, a lot has happened, as most of you know, from being here last month. Some of the items, again, on the left, you've kind of seen. We did officially get the certificate of occupancy from the township for the new space and the vertical circulation back earlier this month. Actually, 2 days ago, the new vertical circulation elevators went online in the Wiley building for the first 2 floors as they continue work on the tunnel. Carpet installation actually just got completed yesterday in some of those areas, and they're completing it throughout the rest of the week. And then coordinating with TSA next week, it's supposed to be the go-live date of switching over to the new space. They've already moved the AIT2, which is that large scanner where you stand to the side. They've already moved that. So the sooner that they move is actually better because the existing checkpoint now doesn't have that in place. So coordinating with them. Biggest things ongoing and upcoming, again, because the new vertical circulation elevators are online, we can decommission the old elevator. Site paving, still working through some components there. Working through the punch list as well. And you'll see other than the shell complete, there's a couple components that we were waiting on for some material. And then obviously the tunnel renovation. Next month, we'll kind of adjust these slides a little bit, really to focus more on the tunnel and that transition that we're going through now. Again, we talked about this. Some of these photos I can go through rather quickly, again, since we've all seen them. Again, as a reminder, with the space, coordinating with TSA on the last stanchion layouts right now, so they're ready to go for next week. That's that AIT2 machine I mentioned on the right-hand side there. It's now in place, everything's up and running from the TSA's perspective. Again, some more views of the facility. And thank you everyone for coming to the event. I think it was great, again, to have everybody see it, see everyone's reactions for how long we've been working on this project. Again, carpet in this area on the, this is the 3rd floor, so those are the elevators are currently in use. That takes you down to the area on the left. And as I mentioned, all that carpet's actually done as of yesterday. And down going into the tunnel is with the next phase that'll then transition, so the whole vertical circulation will be online, and then the old elevators and escalators at the end of the tunnel can be decommissioned and removed. Again, outside we talked about those actually temporary windows on the top were actually replaced yesterday, and then were tested, so they actually have the dynamic glass glazing now, just like the other ones. Again, some other components of the sidings, you see they still have to get in place right here to cover these edges of the windows, so we're waiting on that. So again, going through some of the phasing, all the items on here have been completed. We'll update this again next month with where we are with the tunnel, but you can see a lot of these components are just about there as well. Again, as I mentioned, the building shell is 99.9% complete, just working on some of those elements. The apron is part of this, again, working through that as well. And then, again, the next phase is really decommissioning the existing tunnel equipment, actually working with Leidos, which is the TSA's specific contractor to get the equipment out of the tunnel. So then we can go in and do the renovations and install those secure exit portals, for passengers leaving and not being able to come back through security. Again, all these items that we've been showing have been completed. So again, we'll shift our focus to the tunnel and that transition. Still obviously working on grant receipts. Let's talk about RACB. We're trying to make some movement there. Again, the grants that we have shown there as well. So I believe that's it.
Any questions for Ryan? Since Ryan brought it up, I have one comment. I don't know who all worked on it. I know Colin worked on it hard, but that event that day was amazing. I think the team, deserves a big credit for that, and I think hope Colin gets a recognition that he deserves for the stress that him and his family went through getting that done. I talked to his wife, so you guys can all look at him how you want. I know the stress that they were put under. Paul puts my family under the same. So I wanted to thank Colin, and I was going to bring it up at the monthly meeting, but since you mentioned it, I figured we'd bring it up now.
Appreciate it, yeah.
Anything else?
Make sure he gives you a couple bucks for that.
Oh, he already did. All right, thanks, Ryan.
All right, thank you.
Any new business? All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, then we will start with.
Go ahead, be like half the price.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll wait 6 weeks, right.
Okay.
That's why when everybody was lining up outside the stores, I was like, there's no way I'm gonna wait in line
Hey,
for a jersey. I'm not doing it. And sleep there? I'm good.
I can see you sleeping there.
I'll get it later.
Are we ready? Okay. Okay, John, we are back.
Okay, sounds good, everyone. We are good to go for the August 24, 2023 Executive Committee meeting. First item on the agenda is public comment. Sylvette, do we have any?
We do not, sir.
Okay, thank you. Next on the list is approval of the meeting minutes of the June 22nd, 2023 meeting. They were distributed on Novus Agenda. Entertain a motion to approve.
Make a motion. Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hello?
Aye. Aye.
Okay, thanks. Okay, opposed? Okay, and we're gonna double back. I skipped the part where we were supposed to call roll. So that, could you do that, please?
Sure. John Hayes,
Here.
Glenn Reedman,
Present.
Justin Grimshaw,
Here.
Mike Stershik,
Here.
Paul Anthony.
Here.
We have a quorum, sir.
Okay, thank you, Sylvette. Next on the agenda is approval of the Florio Perucci invoice for June and July 2023. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Second, do we have any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the subject indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion approved. Thank you. Okay, next we have approval of amendment for resolution 2358 conflict of interest policy. Talked a lot internally in regard to bylaws and conflict of interest, et cetera, and we've not talked about these topics as a board in quite some time, and thought it was important to put them on the table for a couple of reasons. The most important being we all have lives outside of and independent of the Board of Governors. We actually had an instance a few years back with a prior board member where he had a conflict not from a professional standpoint, but actually from a personal standpoint. So again, it's not somebody that's on the board anymore, but we all have different interests and different involvements and things of that nature. So we thought it good corporate governance to take some time and spend some time in regard to conflicts of interest. And we'll talk about bylaws when we get to the discussion items. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Solicitor Marcon to take us through the topic at hand. So Solicitor Marcon, please take it forward.
Thank you. And so that if you can actually bring up the markup, I think that would be easier because there were not a lot of changes that were made, but the markup will show you, it was a lot of just cleaning up language, and we've talked about putting things into plain English rather than some legalese. So terms like shall, or we're going to change those to may, must, should, whatever the actual meaning is. Also trying to just make gender neutral language where possible. Anything that's crossed out here is actually added somewhere else. So it was just reorganized a little bit to be better to understand. If you scroll back up to the top. So we defined as affected persons, and that is going to be you, the members, any officers and executive level staff employees, and then any other employee that may be designated. So those are the affected persons that's to whom this policy will apply. But as public servants, you know, you're held to a higher standard when it comes to your conflicts and how you wheel and deal, that you're not entitled to use your office for personal gain. And that personal gain may come in your personal life, it may come in your business life. It doesn't have to be just in your personal life. It also applies to members of your family. So you would benefit from something that a parent, a sibling, son or daughter would benefit from, would also benefit you. And so that's defined. I don't believe we have that in the policy, but it is in the bylaws amendment that will, or provision that we'll take a look at.
So Elizabeth, can we ask questions as we go along?
Yeah.
All right. So the employees as may be designated by the executive director. I'm just a little bit confused on that, like who that could be.
Yeah,
Because it's at,
and the challenge, and I can jump in here, Paul, on that one. So the way it was listed before was executive level staff, which, you know, are the people that attend these meetings.
Mhm.
But then it really just listed in such other staff such other employees that we could designate. It's really just saying those employees could be people who have other fiduciary responsibilities, people in our procurement group, other folks who aren't executive level staff, but might need to have that based on their financial dealings for the authority. They would have a responsibility here.
And it could be project-based as well, that they're working on a certain assignment where then you need to make sure there's not a conflict.
So it's hard to put just titles in there because titles and positions can change. So this was really geared towards making sure we could adjust that. And
It is, but it's subjective to the executive director. And that could change. As you said, that could just change year to year, project to project.
Could. It could.
Yeah, I guess, for example, if we hired somebody to help Ryan on some of the capital projects, that person would be designated, because Ryan is by default as senior staff.
Correct.
But if he would hire somebody to help him, that person would probably become designated.
That doesn't say that in here, though. He may be designated by executive director.
Yeah,
It says
I'm
he
saying
will,
maybe,
shall.
yeah.
He may be. So to me, it's subjective.
So it's the concern that you would like board oversight of that, or
No,
that
because
you
then-
want more specific language? How do we fix
A
that?
little more language, strength in language, because I don't want every position here to come in front of the board. I don't think that's
Right.
our function, but I'd like to see a little stronger language on that. To me, it's a little subjective.
Okay.
Do you have a recommendation on stronger language, Paul?
No, I do not, John.
Yeah, I don't know
Limited
how you
electrician.
can work around that may, because not everyone is going to be. You know, some people will, some people won't.
Mhm.
And I don't know how you get stronger than may with a as needed designation.
But I think it needs to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, and that's why it's stated as may be designated, that there's a possibility that other people will also come under the auspices of this.
Can, maybe, let me ask you this, but if we defined, somewhere in the bylaws defined affected persons, because I don't know that that's defined.
That's what it is. It is,
Yeah, but
before you say affected persons, that's
is
the
it
definition.
defined somewhere though?
That is the definition, right here. Members of the board, officers, executive level.
Fiduciary relationship.
Okay.
I think that was
Yeah.
how it was.
I'm just
We
thinking.
could say others with a
trying to think
fiduciary
of a-
relationship to the authority.
Right.
And put that as part of the definition
That's a
rather
better way to
than,
do it. Yeah.
rather than saying, you know, this is your role after you've been designated, that you're designated because of your fiduciary duty.
I'm more comfortable with that.
I'm looking at this definition, and the only person who's going to be in position to know where this should apply beneath the executive level employees, which we have named in here, which is appropriate, will be Tom. So I'm not sure how we can make it more objective, because it is going to be a moving target.
So what about the definition of fiduciary relationship? Who has that relationship with the airport? Supervisors? I don't know.
He's got to determine that.
Right.
Tom's got to determine.
So the executive director would determine each supervisor has the fiduciary duty regardless of who they are, I guess, or what department they cover.
Again.
Well, all employees have a fiduciary responsibility to the airport authority, I would assume, to the airport authority and the airport. What we're talking about here is who falls under conflict of interest designation.
Right,
And
and
I
it's the
think
people
it's-
that have the power to make decisions and
Right.
to alter
Right.
the
And
outcome of,
just- yeah.
alter the work.
People that have the authority to make decisions.
Right.
Understand that.
Would you still be looking for some language that describes that then?
I would actually, yes.
Okay, and I can play around with just adding that sort of
Please.
language to the definition of affected person.
Okay, thank you.
So why don't we scroll down? So then also here in two, before you go too far, stop. We just made that easier to understand. Like, instead of it is incumbent upon, like, you have a duty. So we don't want it to be confusing to, I think we all know what those words mean, but at the same time, you're like, I'm not really sure. It's been a long time since SATs. So then that's pretty general. And then, again, this is just gender neutral language. To the extent that we could do it, this one is going to appear down here. So we also just made sure to break out each duty into one idea. And so although some of this looks new, it's not actually new. It's just been moved around a little bit. So we can scroll. And then this one, G, is actually new language. So this says that you also must refrain from seeking or accepting any favor or thing of value that's conditioned upon your judgment or your official act. And we also note that although there are some things of nominal value that are often exchanged in promotional purposes, that sort of thing, those are not prohibited. They're not prohibited under the Ethics Act. They're not prohibited under this policy. However, you are asked to just use your discretion as to, if the value of these things climbs. Like sometimes you get like a little cooler bag takeaway thing, and what if it's a Yeti bag, and those things are actually expensive. So you do want to keep in mind like what is actually nominal, and part of the reason that it is really strict is that sometimes what we say in the law with judges is that the appearance of impropriety is the impropriety itself. So if there could be a perception that there's some trading favors going on, that's a problem, even if it's not actually going on. And then here it's addressing the statements of financial interest. This is the obligation on the chair and the vice chair to understand the requirements of the Ethics Act. They really are put in place in the bylaws provision as well. Like that provision and this policy tracks the Pennsylvania Ethics Act. I think I threw citations in somewhere. There's some citations here. If you ever wanted to look at the statute, I think it's a good exercise to see like what the language is saying specifically. Although again, a lot of it in here is just plucked from the actual statute. It's not very long. It's actually not one that's very hard to read. So I think that could be useful too as you think about the training that we're doing and the revisions that we're doing at this time. Okay, and then this here is some new language as well. So if there's a matter coming before the board where you have a conflict, you need to make it known. And then what we have said in the past is that if desired, you may withdraw from that portion of the meeting. So just completely remove yourself from the room. But now we've also added an extra step that says at the discretion of the chair, you may be compelled to leave the room and leave the discussion. So I think it just depends on the nature of the conflict or the topic at hand. There is some discretion there. If you disagreed with, a compulsion to leave the meeting, you could have a caucus about that. And but it is ultimately the chair's decision if the best thing is for the conflicted member not to be part of the discussion at all.
And Elizabeth, withdrawal from the meeting it means no, you're not allowed to participate in the discussion of that item.
Correct. Correct. And it may even be that you have to step out because we know
no,
body language, facial expressions can also influence others.
That's communication.
Now, Elizabeth actually thought about this as we were going through the process. We should have in here a mechanism where I can be compelled to withdraw as well, because I also have potential conflicts. So we have to include a mechanism here where I could be asked to be removed as well.
Right. Okay. Yes. And so we would have the vice chair responsible for dealing with the chair's conflicts. So should we add
or vice chair to that?
I will make some language there that either specifically addresses that, because I don't want it to say the chair or the vice chair if the chair is there and it's about some other person.
Yep.
That it's not an either or, but that the vice chair is responsible then for the chair. So yeah, I can add that in. Okay, we can scroll, please. And then, of course, the conflicted person has to abstain from voting. And then we just have these definitions. So previously, it was residing in the person's household and minor dependent children. But the Ethics Act actually says parent, child, or sibling. So we changed it to that so it would track.
The child is any age,
Correct, right. So that would be an adult child.
even past age majority, yeah.
Right, and you can see how that would still be a conflict, once your
Sure.
adult children are out in the workforce. So, and also just note that, and this has always been that way, but the provisions of the conflict of interest policy are in addition to the requirements of the Ethics Act if they are different. Our policy is more strict. That's what, the statutes allow you to be stricter. I don't think we really are, but it's in addition to. And then we already defined Ethics Act, so that's why public official and employees crossed out there. Any further questions about that? Okay. So this policy with the changes is what the full board will be asked to approve on.
Will you be able to make those changes by Tuesday?
Yes, yep, I can do that.
Okay, let's make sure when we make those changes and upload it into Novus, let's send a separate email out to the board that it's been uploaded so they have as much lead time as possible to take a look at it.
Okay.
We need to do anything today?
Okay, do we need, yeah, I was just going to ask that, Mike, do we need to vote on this today or no?
Because we have changes that we haven't seen.
You can
Yeah.
approve it on
Pending.
contingency of the changes being made.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we don't know if we approve those changes,
That's true.
right? So
Yeah, that's right. So I think the best path is not to take any action today. It's a full board matter anyway, so it's going to go to the full board on Tuesday. It's on the agenda for Tuesday, so I think we're good simply for the revised conflict of interest policy to go to the full board for consideration and vote.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, do we want to?
Okay, now we're into the discussion items. Employee survey update. Paul, I wanted to kick off by kicking this over to you. This has been a topic that you brought up on a couple of occasions. Just want to give you a chance to talk about it, what your thoughts are.
my thoughts are to have a independent employee survey conducted. That's my thoughts on it. The other thought is it seems to be kind of drawn out, like it's not a priority. It's not a priority to everything going on here, but I'd really like to hear the employees, what they have to say.
Okay, I've got some thoughts on it, but I'll open it up to any of the board members who are in the room, not just the exec committee. Do you have any thoughts on this that you'd like to share?
Yeah, one of the concerns I've always had about employee surveys is that unless you set aside dollars to address the issues that are raised by the employee survey, which you don't know ahead of time, it's an exercise in futility because you've just asked a question and you've really not done anything about it. So you have to be ready or willing, I guess I don't think willing is the right word. You have to be ready and able to address the issues that are raised in an employee survey. And if you're not going to do that, then you might as well not do an employee survey.
Is the survey more for morale?
I think you could say it's more for morale. It's not always monetized.
Well, but morale is, you do away with morale if you don't act on the results.
I think the board's capable, and everybody in this room's capable of acting on concerns.
That's what we hope.
Pretty approved.
Want to circle back again, what topics would we envision asking as part of this survey? What do we put on the table that we're asking in regard to?
I haven't really thought about the topics. I'm assuming, I don't know, John, let me come up with the list.
Yeah, I think it's important that we understand, because Mike, I think, is raising a valid point in terms of if you're not prepared to do anything about it, what I don't want to happen is something like this simply devolves into for lack of a better vernacular, the bitch session, where we don't have anything positive coming out of it. It's complaints, no path, and it can actually do more harm than good. I've seen employee surveys that are not teed up correctly up front, not have any kind of a positive impact, and that's not what we're looking to do here.
All right, I will forward a list out.
Yep. Let me open it up to other board members that are at the table as well. Anyone have any additional comments beyond what Paul and Mike and I have shared?
Look at, get a couple sample surveys to see which type we like to be, since we're starting from scratch here.
A lot of the companies that do the survey work, and you can go to SHRM, Human Resource Management Groups, to look at that. They have sort of canned questions and things that are already out there.
I'm sure there's some that are more fluffy and some that are more nasty.
Well, yeah, I want to balance. I don't want fluffy, I don't want nasty.
I guess to Frank's point, because that's kind of what was in my head, like, this probably came up 6 months ago. Have we reached out to anybody to ask them, can we get a sample of what your questions would be? I mean, they're the ones doing it, right? Like, I could come up with a list of questions too, probably not gonna like
Yeah,
mine,
Yeah.
right? So, like, the professionals, the people who do this every single day, I don't want a plumber doing electrical work, right? It's not gonna work out well. I probably shouldn't be putting that together, and neither should anybody in this room. So like the
Or check with
professionals
our-
that actually do that work, let's get some sample questions from them, and then from there, we can kind of,
Check with our
go with what we
ComSet to
want.
see if any other airports have an employee survey that they've done.
I can do that.
Well, we have an HR
Yeah.
department, right?
Right.
Yes.
Well, rely on the HR department here.
Well, we did reach out. We've actually done some work on this. We reached out, and we reached out to 10 different companies that do this kind of stuff, all from SHRM. And we did pick one, depending on whether we're going to move forward. And it was Innovative HR Solutions, because a lot of these companies want you to do it for a certain size. They want to be able to do it on a regular basis. They don't want to just do one survey. They want to do it on a regular basis. But we did, a lot of background, and this was the one that had the most positive, and it's a one-time survey. They developed the questions. They have a bank of stuff, so they were the ones, and they were the most reasonably priced. I mean, they were in the $5,000 range. There was 2 or 3 of them that were in that range. Some of them were up to $20,000 for some of these surveys.
So to Justin's point, instead of us coming with the questions, we should rely on the experts
Right.
that conduct these surveys to present the questions.
Yeah, we can take a look at that, and in that context, then we can decide, because frankly, I'm still not sold on employee surveys in general, because I've seen as many instances where they've not been effective and actually have harmed things, not helped things, as situations where good has come out of it. So I would like to, I think that's a good path. Let's see what kind of sample questions we're looking at. And I'd like to have that conversation once we have that information in front of us, in light of what we're looking to accomplish and the opportunity to improve the operations of the airport versus the opportunity, frankly, to do damage to the operations of the airport. I don't think it's cut and dried that employee surveys are, by definition, a good thing. It's been my experience that I think there's better ways to gather that information and to make sure that we are in touch and in tune with our employee base. So I want to be cognizant of that question as well.
So on the other side of that though, John, I don't think it's also that they're always negative, right? Like
Absolutely.
They're not always.
they can come out positive as well, and
Yep.
so from my point of view, hearing from your employees in a way that your employees can do it where they don't feel they will be targeted because they are anonymous in this, can really open the eyes to what your employees are actually feeling on a day-to-day basis, which they might be scared to even talk to anybody about because they don't know where to go. And even if they do know where to go, sometimes employees are scared to go there. And I'm not just talking about this airport, I'm talking about life in general. So there's 2 ways to look at it, right? And the other way is you could actually boost what you get in return out of your employees because they feel like their voices are being heard.
And Justin, that's a valid scenario. And in fact, I serve also on the board of directors of Barry Isett and Associates. And we have done employee surveys on an annual basis as part of, I think it's either the Morning Call or Lehigh Valley Business has the program for best workplaces. And we've gotten a lot of valuable information out of it. So I've been in a situation where it's worked positively, but I've also been in a situation where it's worked negatively. So that's why I want to have that discussion. Your point is valid, and I've seen it work, but I've also seen the other side.
I agree, John. And the hope is that there's a lot of positives that's come out of this to see what we're doing right.
Yep. Okay, so let's do that. Let's get the information, the samples. We get that in front of exec, and we can continue. I do recognize as well. Paul and Justin both said this. This topic's been on the table for a while now. And we do need to move it forward. So let's plan on this being on the agenda for the September exec committee meeting, and let's plan on making a decision on what path we want to take coming out of that meeting.
Okay.
Okay, is that good with everyone? I can't see
I have a question
anyone, so
about- I have a question
I'm
about
kind of
that.
flying blind here, so I can't read anybody's body language.
So is that enough time to develop, to have questions developed and that we can actually start looking
I
at?
mean, we've narrowed it down to a firm that we use, so they've been reaching out to us, so it's really just get some information.
Right. So my understanding is we're not going to develop the questions.
They
We're
already
going to
have
go
it.
to the experts. They have the questions. We can review those.
But a month is enough time to have them bring it.
Yeah,
I think so.
yeah, I think so. I mean, they've just been kind of waiting for us to kind of, what we want to do next.
I think the other point, John, you mentioned that there's some firms that do yearly, right? And there's turnover
Yeah.
in employees. So why not do yearly? Todd, you're saying you're at $5,000 range?
Well, I think we have to have the conversation whether we're going to do it before we decide to do it, how frequently.
Well, John, we need to do it.
Oh, I understand, Paul, but you're one voice and I'm one voice. We've got to have the full airing of it, and I'd like to have the samples in front of us before we have that conversation.
See you next month. Bring it back to us. I'm a yes.
Absolutely.
Let's move on.
And it's an
Yep.
operation.
No, and we need to plan it. I agree with both Justin and Paul on this. We need to decide at next month's meeting what we're going to do and how we go forward. I don't want to see this extend any further out than it already has either. I do agree with you in that regard.
Thank you, John.
Yep. Yep. Okay, next is the bylaws amendment update. This, I think I turn over to Attorney Marcon as well.
Yeah, let's do the markup again.
Yep. So real briefly, Elizabeth, before you jump into this one, this was topic of an email exchange. I think everybody saw it a week or two ago. I've been, and this is both driven by our bylaws, which require periodic review of the bylaws so that we make sure that we keep them current. And it's also driven out of my background in terms of serving on various boards. The boards that make it a habit to review bylaws on a periodic basis to make sure they're current, make sure they're fresh. And also, frankly, it reminds us in some instances of what we are required to do, because at times things can slip, and that's not a shot. That's just a statement of fact. We all are human. We all make mistakes at times. So it's always a good idea to go through the bylaws, make sure that we've got everything current and updated. There was nothing in particular that drove this other than good corporate governance. So I know there was a question whether anything happened that spurred this, and the answer to that is no, nothing happened. We just want to make sure that we function as a good board, and good boards periodically review their bylaws. So with that, I'll turn it over to Elizabeth.
So, John, just on that point, when was the last time we reviewed the bylaws?
I think, Tom, was it 2018?
Yeah, so every 5 years is when we're supposed to review them as a group.
5 years.
And we'll be up for that again in 2024. So next year, we'll have a look at the full review per the bylaws to review the full document.
Okay, next, so that'd be on the agenda for next year, 2024.
Correct.
There was an amendment in the interim.
Sure, of course.
So regarding the anti-discrimination language.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so here, again, we're just trying to speak in plain English, make things a little easier to understand. So not just this nebulous statutory law, but the Ethics Act, that's what we're talking about. And then here we added the definitions right in the bylaws provision so that you're not cross-referencing, well, what does that mean? I have to look at the Ethics Act to figure that out. These definitions, Sylvan, if we can scroll a little, the conflict and conflict of interest, and then immediate family, come right from the Ethics Act, and now they are prominently in the bylaws provision as well. And then here, just making sure we're saying authority and not airport, cleaning up the shells to make them more specific. The bylaws really didn't change except to make the citations to the Ethics Act, more clear. And then I also added about the affected person who may withdraw from the meeting, except that could be compelled to in the discretion of the chair. And I'll track this the same to make the vice chair responsible for the chair in that regard. And then also, this is in the Ethics Act, but was not part of the bylaws. And it's this little subsection A here. It's not likely to apply to a board of this size. However, I did want to put it in here such that if the authority would be unable to take an action that it needs to because of members who are required to abstain, and the conflict is disclosed, then the chair may permit those members to vote so that there's not a deadlock.
You're talking about a tie?
Right.
Would the tie mean it's not approved?
Well,
I mean, if there's,
if you're unable.
If there's 12 board members and the quorum is 8, and the vote is 6-6, the action doesn't pass.
Right.
So if, in the event that somebody has to step out and it becomes 6-6, that shouldn't change the outcome of the vote to make it positive if that person votes in favor or votes against it. It just doesn't, it fails. I don't understand why that we have to specify that when if you've established a quorum, to begin with, you don't need to worry about the numbers, because the quorum doesn't go away when somebody leaves.
Okay.
At least the way I've read bylaws in the past, once you've established a quorum, the quorum is established for the entire meeting, no matter how many people remain.
And that would mean that the person abstaining or required to abstain unless
Right, gotcha.
they come in here would.
Yeah, I don't understand why that's there, because it doesn't make sense to me from a governance perspective, why that would change the vote.
Right. I guess I'd have to talk to you a little bit more about, is there a specific situation where this could happen, hypothetically? If it's a never possible situation, then this doesn't come into play,
I'm trying to figure out how it's possible. Yeah,
in the provision or not. And
Unless-
if there's some remote theoretical possibility that it could come into play.
The only way in which I think it could come into play is if your bylaws say, which I don't know, I haven't seen any that say this, that if a quorum is a moving target.
Right.
So in most bylaws, it says once a quorum is established, it's established for the entire meeting, no matter how many people remain at the meeting. Mm-hmm. If you change that says the quorum, you lose a quorum if somebody should leave or be required to leave by virtue of a conflict of interest. And I don't believe our bylaws say that.
No, and the addition of this isn't intended to make the quorum then a moving target. It was simply adapted from the act itself, which does allow a conflicted member to vote if all the procedures have been followed. And again, the authority would be crippled on some action. So I guess here, in our case, it may not.
Do we have anything, and I have to go back and read the bylaws because I have to say I don't recall it. Do we have anything that requires a 2/3 majority of the board in order to take action?
Right, I was
Amendment of
just
the
thinking
bylaws.
of that, yeah.
So that would, but an amendment to the bylaws would probably not be a conflicted situation.
Probably not, but a lot of legal language is there and the like,
Yeah.
well, theoretically it could happen and.
Yeah, I'm just thinking what require, what we require of a certain number of, which,
Yeah, that scenario came up too as you're going over this with me, like if there's a supermajority,
Yeah.
then you may be crippled without that person's
Right.
vote. And again, it's hard to go through all the iterations where a conflict will come up, where a deadlock will come up, where,
yeah, well, so, yeah, some
paralyzed
some
without.
boards require a supermajority to assume a certain level of debt.
Some boards come to a 6-6 vote and the chair doesn't vote, and the chair only gets a vote as a tiebreaker.
Yeah, that's
Lot of-
where I was gonna go, Justin. That
That's
and
true.
also, Mike, I'm curious, I'd like to hear more in terms of your thought regarding establishment of a quorum. And this could be just a matter of how I've seen things handled versus what actually was in the bylaws, but I've only seen instances where if you have someone who is leaving and you would no longer have a quorum, typically the boards I've sat on, we accelerate when we're voting and try and get to the point before that person has to leave so that we have a quorum for the vote. What you're saying is different than that, that if we have a
Yep.
quorum at the beginning of the meeting, we have a quorum for the meeting, whether or not we drop below quorum by way of people having to leave. That's a different spin. I've not seen that prior, so I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah,
So if I could say something, like, I think I've abstained from 2 or 3 votes here. I gotta be honest with you, I don't personally feel comfortable, if I feel like I need to abstain from a vote, I don't feel comfortable with anybody in this room telling me, no, it's okay for you to do. Right? I don't like handcuffs, I'm not into them, I'm not interested in them. So like, if I'm feeling I'm abstaining from a vote, it's because of the Conflict of Interest and the Ethics Act. So I don't feel comfortable with anybody in this room telling me, well, maybe you, because I would call you if I needed help after that. Being a lawyer.
It says that you may be permitted, not that you must be compelled.
Right. That's what I was gonna
Say
say.
yes, and I can
Justin.
still say
It is
no.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, you still have the ability to say no.
yeah,
Okay,
you can say
That
no.
that you're not going to vote.
Yeah, that's what I like about that.
okay.
Yeah,
I didn't pick up on
that ability, Justin, is not being taken away from you. It's to give you cover if we need you to vote on a topic, but it does not, as Elizabeth just said, it does not require you to vote on said topic. You still have the ability to abstain.
Yeah, I missed that in a couple words in there.
Okay.
Okay, and then, pretty sure that is all for. So we're just asking you then to bring any issues regarding this provision to the chair and the solicitor. And then up above, what we just scrolled over is fine, because that was just, again, the language and just being consistent with terms.
Yep. Okay, so I do think, Elizabeth, we've got some changes we need to make to this as well. So I'd open it up for questions, but I'm not envisioning a vote. I think we defer this to the full board on Tuesday as well.
Do we have to do the additional wait, that we had a certain number of days that we had to have this in
It's
advance?
21 days according to our bylaws. which
That's
is-
a good
we have
question.
to-
Yeah, can we
we
vote
have
on
to-
this?
can
on
we
Tuesday
act
with
on this?
changes, or does that
Or do
require
we
us
have-
to defer this
Yeah.
to the September meeting so that we can meet the time frame?
To look at the revised.
Yeah. Does the 21
Yeah.
days apply to a revision once it's been?
Notified. Yeah, it was a notice to the board. That's a good question.
Yeah, I
give-
mean,
Given
It's
that
up
it
to
is
you
a
if we
bylaw
wanna do
change and
it.
it ties into the conflict of interest policy, I'd rather we defer approval of this to September so that we don't have anyone question whether or not we met our requirements in regard to notice.
and the notice is to the board. It's so that you members have time
Yeah.
to digest the
Understand.
information. It's not like a violation of law if you were not to follow that. So in this sense of, there's just a revision, I think you could go ahead with, their notice has been given, you've had the time to look at it, but if you want the time again to look at the revisions, I think that's perfectly fair as well. And so if we just move that to September and then.
I mean, if this is really only for good governance and there's nothing that we're trying to, CYA right now, then there's no reason not to move it and let everybody just, digest it a little deeper.
Yeah, right, there's no.
Yeah, Yeah, I think Justin's right on that, and I am always, when we're touching bylaws, we've got to make sure that we do everything according to Hoyle. So yes, let's defer this to September. Okay, then I think, unless anybody has any other questions in that regard, I think next up, we've got Connie to review the Commercial Services Department.
Yep.
Oh, last but not least. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Commercial Services. And we'll just talk a little bit, about what we do in our department. First up, just as a refresher, in our passenger services team, you walk by the desk. If you come in on the lower level, we are airport greeters, and we provide luggage assistance for our passengers and customers. We even jumpstart cars if the batteries die. We do some exit lane monitoring, and we operate the airport shuttle bus for the parking lots. We obviously watch how many passengers we assist with wheelchairs. That will help us with our staffing. And looking ahead, you can see this summer we were, looks like almost 1,600 passengers a month for June, July, or yeah. Actually, May, June, and July. We didn't add the August numbers. But that's almost 50 passengers a day that are requesting assistance. So that number continues to grow.
Is that because we have more Florida flights?
Yeah, and I think we have a lot of nonstop flights, and it enables,
Florida flights.
but it's great because we have the nonstop, and it's so easy for anyone who might need a wheelchair to just get on one end and get off, and then their family members are on the other end. All right, next one. So we actually, the service commenced for the airport parking shuttle way back in 2019. It kind of started and ended in 2020. Then we started it again in 2021. So it's been operating, periodically for the last few years. So this is really just a full year that we have been operating it, 2022 and year-to-date 2023. But you can see we're picking up a lot of customers in the parking lot and bringing them to the front. So I think our customers really enjoy the shuttle and ask for it outside of even when we're operating. And just a quick look at some of the.
Connie, to stay on the shuttle for a question, because that's when we talk about parking deck and we talk about parking, the only other alternative we're going to have is offsite parking and buying acreage anywhere. Could you expand a little bit in terms of customer receptivity to the shuttle? You said that it's been generally positive. Is there anything in addition you can share in that regard?
Oh, it's been very positive. We typically operate it from 4:30 in the morning to 5 o'clock at night. If you, as a parking lot fills up, it's a far walk. So initially, when we started the shuttle service, we wanted to use it as a shuttle service for the overflow lot. But then we identified, the need to just pick up passengers on the other side of the lot. And, I see this growing, each
And
year.
it kind of goes hand in hand, John, I think, with some of that wheelchair assistance you're seeing too.
Right.
Yep.
Just being able to provide that as we get further out in the lot, it is a little bit of a distance to get to the terminal.
And,
It is.
we have a lot of families traveling, and they have strollers and car seats and lots of luggage. And so this is very convenient when we operate the shuttle. So we'll see this grow, and hopefully by the next presentation, we can see how the whole year played out. Let's see. Year to date, we jumped with the assistance of parking 53 cars. I always find that interesting. That's a huge bummer when your car doesn't start. So we're glad that we can offer that service. And then next week, yes, the terminal connector will open, and we currently monitor the exit lane. So basically, after the last departure and the TSA go home, our staff will sit in position, and we will just monitor to make sure no unauthorized individuals go, enter the sterile area through the exit lane. And so next week, we'll be extending our hours from, I think right now it's about 7, 8 o'clock at night, but we'll actually be covering the tunnel from 4:30 in the morning through midnight or until the last flight arrives. So we recently hired 6 additional staff to help us fill these shifts, and that actually kicks off next week. So very excited about that, just for the Terminal Connect opening. I had to take a moment to share a photo of Johnny. Johnny has been volunteering here since 2007, and every day he comes to work with that smile as a volunteer. And so next month, we are very excited to announce that Johnny will join our ambassador program. He will be the first employee, and he is very excited to be getting paid for this position. His interview was very humbling. So he's going to start early September, and he will kick off our ambassador program. So more to come on that. All right, so then one of our other departments is airline services, and we, of course, do the airline ground handling for Allegiant. We handle public and private charters, and we do aircraft de-icing. But before we go to the next slide, we just found out yesterday that airline services participated in a summer contest. They like to drive performance. So Allegiant took all of the bases, and they divided it into 6 divisions. And we found out yesterday we won our division. So we won first place in our division for bases in similar sizes. And that's based on performance. That's the team. We have an outstanding team, and all of that thanks goes to the airline services team. Okay, so we take a look at the flights. So it's very important for my department because this is how we know how to do our hiring, and it does look like, Todd, we will be hiring. But if you take a look at, I wanted to throw 2024 in there because the schedule is for sale, and you can see, well, let's go to 2023, the blue line. We are going to end the year very strong. I think we are going to see our busiest October, of course, that we have ever seen.
Other blue line.
Oh, sorry. Up here. This surprised even me after working with Allegiant since 2005. So I think October is looking, is projected to be the busiest October we have ever seen. Busy November, busy December, and then it's going to continue right into January, February, March, and April. So we are going to be very busy. It's very exciting. The next slide is actually my favorite to look at because if you go back to 2009, you can see in January we had 55 departures. And then this January, we're projected to have 146 landings or departures. So that's tripled since 2019. And we are so grateful we have an excellent team that helps, get the job done every day. All right, each month, the airlines and the airport employees, we get together. We just basically go outside and we participate in our FOD reduction program, which is foreign object debris. That's just a real quick definition, but basically we just go outside and pick up trash and debris. We keep the airport safe and clean. But what we do to encourage participation is we hide a golden bolt out there for anyone participating in helping us clean up the airport. And then the winner will receive a gift card. So Dwight won just last week. They're usually pretty excited. It's a nice program, and we try to provide a little incentive. All right. So the icing season starts, a few years back, we would have said October 15th, but with some of our contracts, it starts October 1st to June 1st. And the airline services team will be doing training for, 6 air carriers. Then, of course, we have to get ready for all the preseason inspections, and I just cannot believe it is the end of August, and we are looking at this. But so September, although it's a slower season for us, it will be very busy getting ready for de-icing season. And we have a team of about 25 who handle the de-icing. And then last but not least, every month to thank our employees and our entire airport team. We try to do just a little something to show our appreciation and thank the employees for all that they do. So we do have additional events planned for September, October, November, and December. I'm not sure why it mixed up like that, but so we definitely celebrate all the holidays in the summer, Memorial Day, Independence Day, and Labor Day. We just bring an ice cream truck to kind of thank the employees who are working the actual holiday. October, we'll do a coffee, tea, and cookies. And this year, for the first time, we're going to offer snow equipment rides for our employees on the runway. We did rent out the Roxy for a movie night, and we hope to have our holiday party in December. So, may not seem like a lot, but it sure is busy. So, but anyway, thank you, everyone. Do you have any questions?
I can open up the floor to questions for Connie. Connie, great job by you and your team. There's an awful lot that falls on you to make sure that the airport runs effectively and smoothly, and we thank you and your team for all of your hard work in making that happen. So I want to start with that and then open it up to the floor.
No questions, John, just thank you, Connie.
Yep. And Connie, I just wanted to put, if you could go back one slide, I just wanted to point out a mistake. I don't see Take a Taco on that list. So I think I speak on behalf of the entire board. If you can bring them back, that would be appreciated.
They're in April, John.
Oh, I missed that. Okay, never mind.
We added that, John, and everyone loved it. I mean, the food trucks are the best. We all head out there and.
Make sure it gets on the employee survey.
Absolutely. It is funny. I do a lot of food and I've been getting pushed back that people don't want food anymore. Here at the bank, it is funny how the thoughts evolve.
It brings
the thing
up the
one?
day-to-day.
Booze?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So again, Connie, thank you very much. Very much appreciate everything again that you and your team do. We appreciate it.
Thank you, John, and thank you, everyone.
My question was how weather dependent is the battery?
Oh, that I do not know, but I
Because I was wondering if it was
I
low,
bet it's in the-
if it was low this year because we had a milder winter.
let's hope we'll continue to have a milder winter. But thank you. I'll try to look
Thank
into
you.
that for you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, again, Connie, thanks. Do we have any new business that anyone would like to bring before the committee this morning?
John, I do. I'm not sure if it's in the right spot here, but I'm gonna open it up anyway.
Yep.
The survey for the concession for the liquor board, that the inspectors were gonna call the board members. Do we have any, like, outline of what they would be asking us, what they would be, I mean, I can't speak for everybody in the room, but I've never talked to the liquor board.
I think they're
Turn it
pretty,
over to Darren for that one.
I think it's pretty general questions, but actually I think we're pivoting on that and we're probably not going that route anyhow. The liquor license is probably gonna go straight to the concessionaire again as it has in the past.
Like vendor to vendor?
As we've gone through it and realized sort of how it has to operate if we own it, it doesn't work as well as we thought it would. So I think we're basically gonna go back to them just holding and taking us out of it, so.
Okay, great.
Probably will not hear from them. If you are going to, we'll let you know, but I would not expect that you guys are gonna hear from them.
How does that liquor license
Don't wanna
work?
screw it up.
Does the vendor have to give it up, or can they take it with them? Because it's here.
It's an airport license.
Right. It's just
Airports aren't.
Through the vendor.
What's that?
It's specific to
It's
the
specific to
airport.
the airport.
Is that the kind of stuff they ask? Okay. Cool. All right, thank you. That's all we got.
Or go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think that was it, John.
Someone had a question. I just want to double back.
No, I think we're good, John.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sounds good. Do we have any need for exec session today? None that I'm aware of, and silence equals no exec session. Okay, everyone, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Okay, we're good, everyone. Thank you. Then I will see everybody on Tuesday at